Welcome to another edition of CEO/Founder Wisdom Podcast. Today with us, we have a legend, David Allen. He's founder at David Allen Company. You probably know him from the Getting Things Done, aka GTD movement, which I've been following since a decade from now. Started my career as a young founder, didn't have much direction. I would just open my computer and go in all types of directions. I discovered GTD. I think it was a plug from Tim Ferriss or something like that. And things have changed since then. I've been way more focused, way more productive. So really honored to have David on the pod here. He's been kind of a mentor of mine without knowing it, which is a funny thing that authors and prominent podcasters/CEOs do. And we're going to have some questions for David about that. But David, can you start by introducing yourself and tell us what you're up to nowadays?
Sure, Charles. Well, I've spent 40 years trying to figure out what are the best practices that we can engage in so we get more done with less stress and less effort. I'm Mr. Lazy. I'm the laziest guy you probably ever met. So I just figured out, how do you make sure that you can stay as productive as you can be without being distracted, without having a lot of stuff in your way? And, I had a background of martial arts and meditation practices and so forth. So I was interested in clear space. I've always been aware of how cool clear space was. Clear space, physically, obviously, but obviously most important, clear space in your head. So you have room to be creative, strategic, of service, just more present with whatever it is you're doing. It's a healthier way and a safer way to live. And so I discovered piecemeal. I didn't wake up one morning with this whole methodology. It was piece by piece for a few years and began to put it all together. And it took me, Charles, it took me about 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out. And then nobody else seemed to have figured it out the same way. And that it was bulletproof. Anybody implemented any of the stuff that I found out. And, I started out with my own consulting practice. And then somebody at the big corporate training world saw what I was doing. I said, gee, David, we need that in our whole big corporation. Can you design some sort of a training around the model you've come up with? And so I did. And that then threw me into the corporate training world, where I'd been trained hundreds of thousands of people, mostly in the US corporations. And a lot of my consulting just turned into coaching of one-on-one to mid to senior level people at their desk. They wanted my assistance to help them implement what I'd come up with, so they could stay kind of on top of their game instead of being buried by it. And so that's what I did. And finally, I got some good advice. They said, David, you ought to write the book. It's like, oh, okay. Gee, if I got run over by a bus, I guess it'd be good to write a manual about everything I'd come up with, in case anybody was interested. And so that's what I did. That's when the first edition of Getting Things Done was published in 2001. And then, that sort of changed the game because it became a bestseller and then spread around the world, 30 languages, 3 million copies now have been sold, around the world. And so the world then began to knock on my door and say, gee, David, how can I coach this, train this? How can I do this? And so trying to figure out how to scale what I'd come up with was, the next part of the game, which we're still in, but we're pretty far down that road. So we have now certified master trainers around the world, and a number of licensees that we've partnered with to now, implement the training and coaching around this methodology. So this is a very short version of a very long story, Charles.
Thank you for that. My first double question for you is how you started describing your background, martial arts and mindfulness. So we both share that background, are both interrelated, maybe. To me, martial arts, it's been mostly a story of discipline, handling the pain, fighting my fears during sparring. I did Muay Thai. I'm still doing it. I actually broke my nose last year doing so. And mindfulness. So how have these two elements been fundamental, and what parallels can you draw between this and GTD?
Well, GTD is a martial art. It's like, how do I manage all the stuff coming at me as it's coming at me? If 4 people jump you in a dark alley, you don't want a whole lot of distraction on your head. You need to be clear. right? So how do you be clear without 4 people jumping you in a dark alley? How about 200 emails coming at you in a day? You know, and the emails don't tell you what they mean. They just show up. And then you have to decide what they mean and what you're going to do with them and what it means to you and whether you need to do anything about it or not. So it's really a thought process that I uncovered. How do I need to think about that email? How do I need to think about this stuff that has my attention? And so that it doesn't have my attention anymore. And you don't have to finish things to get clear. You do need to be appropriately engaged with them. So appropriate engagement is really the game of GTD. How do I appropriately engage with my health, my life, my career, my dog, my relationships, my computer? You know, what is it that I need to do so that that's on cruise control and nothing is grabbing my attention about that? So I just figured that out. I figured out how you get stuff off your mind without having to finish it. And so that allows for the clear space.
Right.
Which is aesthetically anyway, I love clear space. I love sort of the Zen idea of negative space, and less is more.
Yeah. Meditation, I want to get to that topic. I'll do this. Segue is kind of rough, but I obviously meditate 15 to 20 minutes a day. Sometimes my meditations have been not so profound. Nowadays, it is somewhat a deep zone, maybe because I'm taking care of my health, maybe because my mindset is there. It's kind of this mental noise, which I think a lot of CEO have. And the greatest sign of that is that they go in the shower, right, without technology and nothing, and they get all their ideas there. It's like unblocking. Meditation can do that. A long walk can do that. What does your meditation practice look like nowadays? And do you still get like very deep insights from blocking out all the noise? Or is your full date like zero noise and full mindfulness, which would be pretty impressive?
It's pretty much no noise, in my life. I eat my own dog food, as they say. I practice this stuff as well. I hate having stuff on my mind that doesn't need to be there. So I know how to get rid of it. And so, I capture stuff that has my attention. I clarify exactly what it means, what I'm going to do with it. I have an organization system, a trusted brain externally outside of my head. So I can be reminded of the things I need to be reminded about without giving my brain that job. It doesn't do that job very well anyway. And so, so I do that. So, it's kind of a walking meditation, Charles.
Right.
There's no, there are times I stop and just don't do anything. And then let happen whatever happens. And that can go deep. It can be shallow. It can be all kinds of different things. It is whatever it is.
So you have a lot of free time, it's kind of a Zen garden. So my question is, what do you do with that free time? And do you also correlate that current state of Zen with your happiness levels?
Well, happiness is overrated. I think as happy as you get, that's as depressed as you'll get. I like the word satisfaction. I'm satisfied.
Right.
Look, if you look at somebody who's highly productive, do they look happy? No, they're
No.
engaged. They're on. If you ask them, are they having fun? They go, well, I guess you might call this fun, but it's not. That's not the game. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're highly engaged in what they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with being happy. I like that. I like to laugh. I like to do that as well. But that's essentially the aim is to have a clear head. What you do with that is quite unique to you.
Right.
You want to be happy. You want to be present. You want to be creative. You want to be strategic. All those are what people do when they have more space in their head. So, my methodology is how do you create that space? It doesn't tell you what you need to fill it up with. It's up to you.
Right. 100%. So my productivity background has been quite the chaos. And funnily enough, I feel good in that chaos. I feel productive in all of that chaos. There is some kind of method to this madness. So there's GTD and there's Thiago Forte, which I really like. And I've tried various things. My first was a GTD-ish method, which was a Trello board, Kanban style. Let me tell you what I remember from it. So there's my brain dump, right? So I just take my notes in there. There's to be done in the next 7 days, I would say. And then there's the to be done in the next 30 days, which is kind of really not that much important. And then there was the eventually I'll have these things done, my kind of moonshots. I went from that to a simple Google Docs. I also became less obsessed about like writing down everything, because that was the Thiago Forte method, and that will lead to a next question of mine about AI. But I went through all this chaos and through measuring obsessively everything and to not measuring stuff. And I can even say that am more productive from a broad KPI level nowadays. So do you often deal with these CEOs that are kind of ADHD like myself, and have tried the method and have OCD-ness in them, have not got the exact results that they wanted from it, and then they kind of incorporated their own soul into the method and became a bit more happier or relieved? Is it like a hard method, or is it flexible, is the question?
No, people customize this all over the place. The principles are intact. If it's in your head, it's in the wrong place. That's a principle. How you get it out of your head, where you keep it, that's up to you. A good million different ways to do that. At last count, there were over 300 software apps that were built around the GTD model, Trello and Thiago's work and all that stuff. GTD started all that, really started the life hack movement. But the principles, and you also need to decide sooner than later what you're going to do about stuff that has your attention. How can you fault that? Right? That's a basic principle. Otherwise, you haven't finished your thinking. There's decisions you haven't made or thinking you haven't finished yet about something. If you haven't decided the very next action you need to take about, should we adopt, should we get divorced, should I hire a vice president, should I get a new cell phone, all that stuff that has people's attention. And most people have a whole lot more on their mind about that than they realize. So a lot of my stuff is about, become much more conscious about what it is that has your attention. And then here's the algorithm or the formula you need to apply in terms of what you need to think and decide about that stuff. And then you have to then figure out how you want to organize the reminders of those things if you can't finish those things right away, so that you then build whatever kind of reflection system you need to look at your list, to look at whatever the stuff is that you've come up with. So you manage the inventory of your commitments. Most people have a lot more internal commitments than they have any clue about. And so a lot of this is just becoming conscious about, what are you committed to do? What are you committed to do about your health? What are you committed to do about your dog? What are you committed about your relationships? What are you committed about your career? What agreements do you have with yourself about any of that? And I don't tell people what that should be. I just figured out what the process is that you need to do if you want to get that stuff off your mind. If you don't mind having that stuff on your mind, hey, be my guest. I don't care. It's up to you. I define the game. If you want to play the game, that's up to you.
Right. And hyper ambitious CEOs like myself, we want to reach the top. We constantly have new data over our hands and our heads every day. So the market changes, your product changes, your target customers change. How does one deal with all of that data? Because I would take the technological way, to have some kind of AI give me all of that information, a very summary, kind of bullet points in my inbox or somewhere in a software, and I'd use this broad information in my brain, and I'd use my human capabilities, aka creativity, or my leadership skills to make use out of that. So my question for this is, do you think there's a technological solution to these hard data problems in the age of information, or is it like pure systematic GTD way, like not philosophical way, but there's like a couple of principles? How does GTD integrate with the latest technology wave we've been seeing with AIs and so forth? Are you guys into that, or it's mostly like the same old philosophy?
You just have to curate what you get. It's all decision support. The telephone was decision support. automobile was decision support. Wow, look how many things I could now experience. Wow, what do I do with all that? The telegraph, the smoke signals, the pigeons delivering messages. Come on, there's nothing new about technology is adding new input and data. And I think that's the cool thing about technology is it's providing decision support. It's not going to decide what to buy your mom for her birthday. It'll give you a lot of data that may help, but you're the one who still has to decide. You're going to buy her flowers. You're going to give her a party. What are you going to do? So the first issue you're going to have is, what question do you want to ask AI? Right. And you need to be smart about your question to begin with, and then it could be some cool stuff that you can find out from there. Some perspectives that you may not have had before. That's a lot of what I've seen that Chat GTP would do, is give you some perspective that would look at something in another way, or look at something and say, okay, oh, I hadn't thought about that, or I hadn't thought about that. But you still need to think about those things once you see them. So it's all about curating the data that you get, and the collateral material that you can now develop, that helps. I mean, come on, just mind mapping, just getting stuff out of your head, just going to a whiteboard, just doing a big core dump about a project is going to teach you a bunch of stuff. You're going to see things you never saw before, simply by externalizing your thinking in that way. So all that's good stuff. If you know what you're doing, it's a great time to be alive. If you don't, you're toast.
Right. And I guess most of the decisions come from who you are as a person, your values and all that. That kind of is up to yourself, and certainly not GPT to put on paper.
Yeah, for sure. It might ask you some good questions that would then maybe get you to dig a little deeper in terms of your own self, in terms of what really is meaningful to you. So yeah, good stuff.
Where do you think, so there's a lot of talks about BCIs and Neuralink. How do you think this is going to change the game when it comes to productivity and getting things done?
I don't know what BCI is.
Brain-computer interface. Chip, basically, in your brain. So basically that if you could communicate with someone mentally, or just know like instantly all the data of the market, how will that change the landscape of productivity and the future of
who knows? I don't know. I look, you can know intuitively what somebody's thinking across the planet right now.
You can, yeah, it's kind of.
So it's kind of all out there anyway. It's called I don't know who called it the ionosphere or whatever it is. It's like it's all sort of going on. Like, if you don't want the world to know it, don't do it. So it's a transparent world to begin with. So, I suppose all that stuff might be helpful, but I don't know. I haven't seen anything about it. A lot of that stuff is just kind of gee whizzy stuff, but how long did it take before you were comfortable with three-way dialing on your phone? A lot of people never did. Why? They didn't trust it. They thought, wow, I might lose the connection if I hit the button again. And yet three-way calling was so, hey, wait a minute, let's see what John thinks about this. Great, hold on, let me get him on the phone. Click, ring, John's on the phone, there are three of us talking. I mean, there are a lot of people listening to this right now that even never knew that, or never even tried it because they didn't trust it. So, and teleconferencing, are you kidding? How long did it take, the technology of having a phone in a conference room that people could all hear and talk and hear other people? How long did it take the world to get used to that? It's called years. Now everybody, now we're Zooming or whatever, and everything's cool because the pandemic sort of sped all that up in terms of people getting comfortable with virtual communications. But those things take a while. I don't know. What would you do with a chip in your brain?
Well, I do a bunch of things. First, I think everything is just accelerating with Ray Kurzweil prediction about singularity. Moore's law is certainly still on track to do a bunch of to accomplish a bunch of progress. And basically, what I would do with that, I think the dichotomy here is that there's more and more information on a daily basis being thrown at us, but there's also tools that help to kind of simplify it. But this world, for most, it's really overwhelming. Not just from a business perspective, but like all the news and big news trying to hijack our brains. Your methods are like still very much relevant to get that focus. I'm just afraid that, well, I'm a technologist and I can see like mostly technological solutions to these problems. I think like on a short term, yes, the people, they need to be mindful and be to have a little simple structure that is like if this then that, right? But as stuff gets more exponential and um let's say that in the brain chip context, so that would be like way more data in my brain, it would be classified, and then the conversation nowadays is human, and how will they be complementary with AIs. So my feeling is that the productivity game will be mostly handled by an AI in the next 5 to 10 years, because things are accelerating really quick as of now. And humans, will they be left with the creative part? That is a question. That they'll certainly be remaining with the cortisol system. I mean that the chip could eventually neutralize cortisol and bring like full focus. I'm a very strong believer in the biochemical theory of everything as well, with cortisol and serotonin in your brain. But yeah, I do think most humans, it's just too much for brains, right? We haven't evolved quick enough, and there I think is where your methods come in, and I think they help a lot to a lot of people to remain to keep the focus on a daily basis, especially CEOs, which is my next question. Like, how do you see the GTD system behaving differently or being kind of modified when it comes to CEOs vs a founder that's just starting his company, or versus an employee, is my next question.
Well, first of all, you think too much. But to be simple, look, a CEO or anybody trying to manage anything has two major issues. First of all, is my head clear enough so I can think appropriately about this? And secondly, do I have a process once I've thought about this that I can implement to make sure that the implementation of what I think about happens? So you have a lot of CEOs that are charismatic and, a big, and they're reading all the leadership. By the way, there are 2,000 books a year in the US that have leadership in the title. So God, there's no lack of information about how to be a more charismatic leader. But the fact is, a charismatic leader still doesn't handle the process that the team needs to implement what the charismatic leader comes up with. A charismatic leader can come up with all kinds of stuff, but they're oftentimes what I call a crazy maker. They just come up with an idea, and here's an idea. Go make that happen. Go make that happen. And they don't spend time with the process that needs to be in place and in play. So what GTD does is it gives, if an executive actually implements this, it'll give them more clarity in their head about whatever they want to think about strategically, creatively, innovatively, or whatever. And it also gives them clues about the best process to install so that what they come up with actually happens. See, the productivity equation boils down to two things. The zeros and ones, to your technology point, are outcome and action. What are we trying to produce? And how do we allocate or reallocate our resources to make sure that happens? So outcome and action become the core elements, and they're the core element of GTD thinking. When did you ever go to a meeting that the outcome of the meeting was not clear, and you ended the meeting without people being clear about who was going to do what out of what just got discussed? So just outcome and action thinking, you're not born doing. And it's actually something that you have to train it's a cognitive muscle you need to train. What am I trying to produce? And then what's the next thing I would need to do to move the needle toward closure on that? And believe me, I spent literally tens of thousands of hours desk side with some of the busiest and brightest people you'd meet on the planet, walking them through that exercise of that all the stuff they had their attention on. They emptied their head, and then we went through everything that was on their head and went through that. Okay, so what's the next action you need to take? If that won't finish it, what's the outcome you need to then keep track of until it's done? And changes people's lives just to do that. So my methodology is not like some new technology or some foreign language. It's like stuff people actually know how to do. They just don't do it.
Right. It's concrete stuff. And I do agree. Structured organization and just in and out type of process. And yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with AI nowadays. For example, I'm not sure if you heard about Auto GPT, but it's basically an agent that creates his own tasks. And right now they can't execute on their own tasks, right? Because, for example, if I ask it to find the 10 best productivity expert for my podcast, it would find your email. It won't email them because it doesn't have access to my Outlook, let's say on my Gmail, but it would actually execute the task for me, So I'm seeing right now that the future of productivity as a small team or a CEO like myself, for example, with a bunch of agents, having these agents creating their own task and having these agents getting these things done. So how will that modify? And I see that like very reasonably in the next 5 years. There's like a
Oh,
real.
I don't know. You're not. When are you going to trust them? What's going to let you trust their decisions if they actually start to implement it?
Right. So there will be competing companies, and I will test the tools, right? And there's a stop button, obviously. But if you want to test like 5 of them and see which one has the best results or which one doesn't burn my reputation, for example, that's how I would select.
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
just like employees, right?
But again, Charles, it's decision support. It's not doing it. It's just giving you support for you to make a decision about what needs to happen.
As of now, like they limited their ability to implement, but this is gonna be deployed in the next few months, and I think this is really gonna change the landscape in terms of me like dealing with humans. By the way, vs robots. So my hypothesis is that managers' brain are gonna drastically change and go in a different direction. Yeah, sure, we'll still be in charge of our own decisions, but how do we make decisions? With more data, quality data. That is, it's not like more is better. So with this landscape changing under us, like the questions I have for a productivity expert for you that has been in the game for many years. And again, I'm focusing on the technology point here, but I really think that or human creativity will be like most of our energy spent. It'll be most of our focus. So with these changes coming up, how can I navigate this new landscape as a CEO with so much noise with that technology coming in? You've probably heard about the AI anxiety thing that's going on right now, really prominent in the Silicon Valley. How does that change the landscape and GTD and how it's implemented?
I don't know. How did word processing change writing? How did spreadsheets change accounting? 85% of the companies in the US use Excel to manage their companies. And
Right.
believe me, those were real game changers. Look,
Yeah.
I partnered with Charles Simonia, in an experimental, and Charles built Word. He built Word. He built Excel. He built Office, right? And those were game changers. Believe me, because word processing allowed you to have an idea before it had to be good, because you could then change it. So that changed productivity significantly, and the spreadsheet changed productivity, and relational databases and all that where spreadsheets sort of came from, changed, allowed you to think about all kinds of things strategically and creatively that you wouldn't have before, because you had to have 25 accountants to do what Excel could do for you now by yourself. So those were real game changers. They really changed the name of the game. And probably AI to some degree may be that same kind of change in that way. I just haven't seen it yet. It's
Right.
still not trustworthy yet. It's still not something that people would suddenly use, and suddenly now I can do a lot of other things because of that. I haven't seen that yet.
Right. You talk about satisfaction when we started the interview. I guess that's or fulfillment kind of. I guess that's the feeling we're all seeking at the end of the day. What would you advise for entrepreneurs, CEOs that kind of lose track and end up at the end of the day and say, "Oh, I didn't accomplish enough today." And can you also segue that into the burnout rates that we've seen go up and up with all that anxiety of not being enough nowadays?
Well, oh, come on. What's new? There's nothing new except how frequently there is and how much there is. Right? Uh, Change always produces stress because even if you set a new goal for yourself, you're going to have to undo a lot of other stuff you were doing so you can do the new thing. So there's a constant of change that then requires you to step out of your comfort zone and move somewhere that may be, at least relatively uncomfortable for you. So there's nothing new about that. It's just what's new is how often that's happening for you. How often did your parents, Charles, ever have to reconfigure their life and lifestyle? Not nearly as often as you did, right? And you still are, right? Probably. So, once they got under cruise control, they could then coast for a long time without having to make hard decisions and whatever. Most people these days don't have that luxury because we now live in a 24/7 global world. The world doesn't stop. It's on. And so a lot of people are trying to work harder, faster, do more, take in more. But there's an old personal growth axiom that says you can never get enough of what you don't really need. And what you don't need to do is work harder. And you could never work hard enough. There's no way you could ever do enough, in terms of what you think you ought to be doing or taking into consideration, whatever. So you have to start to build your own filters. You have to start to build your own, okay, what do I need to pay attention to right now? And the simpler, the better, And so, if you've got a team that has 8 things to do, they're not going to do any of them very well. You need to skinny that down to 3 and do them really well. And then what's the purpose of the team? What's the purpose of the company? What's the purpose? So you always have to go back to, the basic questions that GTD gets people to ask. Oh, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Charles, why you have this podcast? What's the purpose of this podcast? What's the purpose of the company that you're in? If that's unclear, you'd be splattered all over the world trying to catch up with you don't know what, right? So you need to get really clear about what you're trying to do. And so that's where, in GTD, it's kind of the hidden part of GTD most people don't see is all the 6 horizons that I identified that you have commitments about. Purpose and values, vision of where you're going, the goals you need to accomplish to get there, the things you need to maintain so that you've got a good engine that can work to get you there, as well as all the projects you need to finish about all that, as well as all the action steps you need to take about all the moving parts. And I couldn't get it any simpler than that, but all those are very real things that people need to be aware of if they want to be conscious about how they're doing in this world. And once you do that, it doesn't really, the speed of the world, the volume of the world doesn't matter that much.
Right.
It makes it that much more important that you do this because you can't stay on cruise control very long before you have to rethink, recalibrate.
Right. I use also very much the 12-week year method for productivity. How does GTD integrate with that one?
I don't know what that is.
12-week year, it's basically that you take track of the year as if it was 12 weeks. So 3 months, for example. So there are also prominent authors in the field. And I've been pairing that with Thiago Forte's method as well, which Thiago's method, what I love, yes, is kind of a variant, and there's strong technological side to it. But basically, I'll just go on with my next question, which is on the weekends, I want to just eliminate all mental noise and not kind of be in work mode and tell my brain, look, it's fine for you to chill a little bit. I have a small to-do list, but I tend to try to remove any productivity method to separate business from personal life. What do you think about that?
I haven't separated those in my life ever. It's just what to do. If you want to call it work, if you want to call it professional, if you want to call it personal, or call it what you want. It's just called what's next.
Because
I don't make any of those distinctions.
I find productivity methods to kind of induce my brain into work mode and getting things done mode. Well, I think that life is more on autopilot and odds to be lived.
Well,
What do you think?
getting things done. How about relax? That's how relaxed are you? If you're trying to relax and you don't relax, that's unproductive, right?
Right.
If you want to have a quiet weekend and you don't have a quiet weekend, that's unproductive. See, people have productivity's got a bad, trappings around it. Everybody thinks, "Oh, work hard" or whatever. And productivity just means producing what you want, and that could be an experience, it could be an emotion, it could be a physical thing. If you go to a party to boogie and you don't boogie, it's an unproductive party.
Right.
So if what are you trying to get done? What you're trying to do is have a balanced life, that's a good project. That's a good value to have. And what's your next action that you would need to take to make sure you've got a more balanced life than what it currently is? That's all. So GTD is just asking you all the hard questions you need to answer based upon what you want to do, but it doesn't tell you what you should do. It just says it's asking you, what do you want?
Right. I call it kind of giving the brain a top three items. Memory span is kind of limited, and sometimes we forget a lot of things. So, for example, just to remind myself to go swim this weekend or go for a hike, and think that the brain, depending in what state it is, it can forget, especially when we're not in good states, which leads to my next question. As a martial artist and as a mindfulness focused person, I could say, how does the state of the brain matter to plan and execute in the whole productivity scheme of things?
Well, what you're talking about are habits. See,
And also biohacking, most probably. For example, caffeine.
No, come on. I empty my in basket and do a weekly review of all my stuff for the same reason I take a shower and brush my teeth. If I don't, it feels bad. I got stuff banging around in my head. I don't like that. So what do I need to do? I need to clean up. I need to, capture, clarify, and organize the new stuff that's come into my life in the last few hours or days. I need to then get that zeroed out. I then need to, make sure I take a look at what's coming up and see the larger landscape and locate myself in space and time, so that then I can go walk the dog or have spaghetti with my wife and whatever, and or work on the business plan. I just finished the last draft of our new book coming out, which is getting things done with others. How do you apply these GTD processes in teams, which has been a big lack out there of a manual for people to help do that. Once you got this, you go, why can't I get everybody else around me to do this? If I did, life would be so much better. And so we never really had a manual for that, but we just wrote one. So that'll be out 1st of next year.
Tell us a bit more about that one, because getting a hold of yourself is already a 10 on 10 difficulty task for most. I guess trying to have others do it is 15 on 10 difficulties. So tell us a bit more about that.
Well, the principles apply to teams that they do to individuals. Because my work and my books have been mostly focused on individual productivity, that you need to capture and clarify and organize and reflect on the stuff that you have your attention on. So the same is true with the team. If I walked into your team, do you have a team, Charles?
Yeah, I used to manage 200 employees. Nowadays, it's way less because of AI, amongst other things. But yeah, I still manage my lovely humans.
Yeah, and I'd walk into your lovely human team and say, what's got your team's attention right now? What's not on cruise control for this team? In other words, we're going to need to capture what's off or not right on yet. And we would need to capture that. Then we're going to go, great, okay, well, that's that thing. Tell me about it. Is there a project there? Is there something that needs to happen? What's the outcome what would you like to have true? about that. And then you're going to define the project and say, who owns this? Who gets this project? And they don't have to necessarily come up right there with what the next action is, but that may be that accountability for them to do that. So hopefully they have GTD under their belt personally. So they would then know how to then manage that conversation that happened at the team level. But there's no difference there. It's like, what's got the team's attention? Why? Something's not on cruise control. Great. What is it? What do you need to do to get that onto cruise control? Right. So that it's just, this is not a cult. This is good business decision. Why would you not have that discussion? And most people haven't. They don't have those discussions until the thing blows up or until they have to make some hard decision under stress. That's not the best time to make those decisions.
Right. So that's a very broad level aspect of it, but yeah, depends on the departments, right? The vision, the mission of the whole company and so forth. So can't wait to actually see that book. Quick one for you when it comes to habits. I consider myself quite good at adopting new habits, from doing Ironmans to meditation. They're all unnatural stuff for me. And learning, most importantly, I consider myself quite good at learning and adapting to new landscapes. What do you recommend for people to adopt habits as quick as they can? I think that my reference in the last couple of years has been Atomic Habits by James Clear. Any comments or thoughts on habit building and how to incorporate the GTD habit into the whole scheme of things?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue most people have with implementing my stuff is your addiction to stress. You're willing to tolerate ambient anxiety. As soon as you're not willing to tolerate ambient anxiety, you'll do what I do. You know, if you like being waked up at 3 o'clock in the morning, oh shit, I should have. Then I go, then, well, how would you like to get rid of that? So people have to then first all realize that they could get rid of that. So there actually is some place to get to that actually has clarity and has focus and has all the golden goodies that GTD actually produces. But you're not going to get people to go do this stuff just for no reason. There's going to be some reason that they would want to do this or not. And so, I've looked for 40 years to try to figure out how do I motivate people to do this? Basically, all I have to do is, what I've basically come down to is I just model this. People meet me and they go, "Oh my God, you're nothing like what I thought. I thought you're going to be tight and uptight and OCD and corporate and whatever." And he said, "Then you're hanging out, spontaneous kind of guy." I go, "Yeah, that's why I came up with what GTD is all about. Is it allowed me to then maintain that and to have that." So people have to buy into that as an outcome to begin with. I mean, all the habits you built are only because you wanted something at the end of that habit being implemented that would give you whatever Ironman or whatever those other things are that you did, that you built into, that you wanted something about that. So you have to then, first of all, buy that. And then if you want to build the habit, tiny habits, all that stuff is really good stuff. Little things at a time. Don't go try to do the big thing. Find some little piece of that you start to do on some consistent basis, and then that gets you to a next level of game where you go, "Oh, okay, well, let me now take on the next level of game that I need to do." So,
right. Habit
that's it.
stacking, kind of generating serotonin in your own brain. Oh, like is one of my favorite. For example, if I do this 15 minutes hit, I finish with a nice meditation that would like be stacking meditation, and then I finish up with a nice yoga, let's say. So that these are one of my favorite for habit
Sure.
stacking.
Whoever did Tiny Habits, Fogg.
Yeah, BJ Fogg.
Yeah, TJ Fogg. He said every time he took a pee, he went and did push-ups. So he wouldn't take a pee until he did a certain number of push-ups. So he'd do push-ups because you take a pee every morning, right? So whatever it is that you do regularly, you tie something into that you would then, like you just said, okay, when I do these kind of things, I do those kind of things. Yeah,
Right.
that's a great way to build a habit.
Yeah, just to segue out of the interview here, I had like personal questions when it came to your books. Is it fair to say that it completely changed your life when the book kind of got viral? And can you speak as per the process of getting a perennial piece of work out there that will make it through the times?
I just did that. And, after 25 years, I knew this stuff worked. I had tested it in the toughest environments where it went viral inside of some of the corporations that you go, anything, a corporation would spit you out in 2 seconds if you couldn't stand toe to toe with the best and brightest people with your stuff. And my stuff went viral. Goldman Sachs is an example, right? If it goes viral there, I don't think anybody else is going to be able to punch a hole in this. So once I was confident enough that the stuff was very real, and the cool thing about it is I didn't have to change anything I say because the principles in there they'll be true 100 years from now. We fly to Jupiter, you still need an in basket. You still need to decide what's got our attention, what's the next action, who's doing it, where do we park reminders that we need to see. So you still are going to have to capture, clarify, organize, reflect so that you engage appropriately. That's true. It's old as dirt, and it'll be true 200 years from now. So it was really cool to have uncovered something that was that essentially universal, like gravity. Like you're not going to not do this, and then find out that the world doesn't know it yet, and then build some sort of business model around it so I could keep teaching it. So could have fooled me. That was not my plan. I'm not an aspirational entrepreneurial person. I'm more of an educator than anything else.
And I mean, you've got top CEOs of Fortune 500 companies reaching out to you like a magnet, kind of on autopilot, while most people struggle to even get one client in a year. You already had a corporate career behind you, but how did that change your life? Like did it added any value to it, or
Not
was it
really.
more of the same?
Not really. More of the same, just cooler people that I got to meet. Some of the brightest and best and busiest folks, and most creative folk you'd ever meet. And then sort of the folks who bought into my stuff and then came to me, come on, one of my biggest fanboys was Howard Stern, kind of changed his life, he'd tell you. And he broadcast that on the radio for 6 months so I can use his name. But, people like Will Smith and Robert Downey Jr., these people are big champions of my stuff because they're running businesses in addition to their acting careers and their entertainment careers. So these are busy folks. But, once you get enough of those kind of things coming at you, well, that's cool. And, I've done over 2,000 podcasts since the first edition of the book was done. I think at some point somebody's going to run out of anybody interested in what I've done, but it turns out they keep showing up. So I just keep engaging with people as they might want. Come on, I'll be 78 this year, Charles. So, I couldn't stop doing what I'm doing if I tried, because it's the best stuff anybody asks me. And again, I'm an educator and in a way a minister. I'm happy to help anybody that needs help and is open to say, how do I get where I want to go better than what I'm doing? And if I have any potential answer for them, I couldn't stop doing that if I tried.
What do you have in plans for the next 5-10 years of your life? By the way, you look very good for 78.
Thanks. I don't know. I'll see what shows up. I mean, the new book, showing up, beginning of 2024. We'll see that's probably going to produce a good bit of. We already have, a couple of countries that are already, wanting the book and talking to Penguin to get the rights to it. So that's going to be popular. I'll probably do a lot of talking with my co-author, Ed Lamont in the UK. About that. So that's probably going to take up a good bit of time. But, come on, I love to cook. We love good wine. We love good food. We bought a wonderful apartment here in Amsterdam and renovated it, and just living here and enjoying life and following what shows up and sort of asks me for my participation. I do a lot of pro bono work around here, around the Netherlands anyway,
Right.
for universities and so forth, people wanting me to come and and talk and give keynote presentations. So
Right.
that doesn't seem to be stopping. So I'm probably still going to be doing that as long as I can.
Right. And you were really gracious to come on the pod, so thank you for that. One last question: I consider my performance on this interview to be suboptimal, whether it was from lack of prep or my current biochemical state, or state of focus. You've been on 2,000 podcasts. You've also been in my seat. What's how could I improve as an interviewer?
I don't think you need to, Charles. You've been authentic, and just being authentic is the key, to success with anything we do. So as long as you're honest and upfront and there, I wouldn't have any suggestions other than what you've done.
Although you mentioned probably half of the pod that it's important to have a goal and a vision, and for this podcast it's for me to get insights first so that I can share it to the world. And somehow, although I did not do the best of jobs here, and I'm not too harsh on myself, I learned tons because you brought me to places which I'm not brought before, just kind of in a jiu-jitsu match or something. So thank you for that. That was really wonderful, David, and yeah, really honored to have you here. Where can people find out more about you or your next book?
Yeah, and the must just go to www.gettingthingsdone.com. And if you want to see little slices of me doing my shtick, in 2 or 5 minute things, as well as my TEDx talks, go to gettingthingsdone.com/YouTube, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to see little small snippets and of that kind of thing. And obviously, the book Getting Things Done, the new edition, in 2015 in English, is a manual. I've had people reread it for dozens of times. They say it's a totally different book every time they read it. So there's a lot in there, but that's obviously a way to stay in touch with this methodology and know what it is.